just looking at the ocean, at the water, what are the first things that come to mind for you as a person? If anybody like in the room wants to respond or online, just like a couple people. What do you see? What's your first thought when you look at the ocean?
You could also probably type in the chat.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be able to see the chat right now, but if somebody could tell me what response is. No? Yeah, shy? Okay. Peacefulness, yeah. So you get some sort of leisurely, recreational sort of spirit from the ocean. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I'm a fisheries biologist, so I work with fisheries. So I would say I would look there and see marine resources. I also know the area, so I would say coral reefs, seagrass beds, things like that. Some other people would look at it and see the need for maybe spatial planning, things like that. Um, and the point of this exercise was meant to just, I guess, make it more clear how all of these little things contribute to, how we manage our oceans, all of these different uses of the ocean. Okay. Wait, am I seeing more things in the chat? Okay, yeah. All right, so first I want to talk about ocean space, right? That's something that is very relevant to everybody. Everybody can understand that. So first we're going to talk about geographic space. So geographic spaces can be the different ocean basins, or if you zoom in a little bit closer, you look at the different seas, like the Caribbean Sea. You might look at the Gulf of Mexico, the Red Sea, things like that. If you zoom in closer, then you're talking about coastline versus deep sea. Um, so all of these are different types of geographical spaces, and I'm sure you can think of more, other examples than these. And then we can also talk about ecological spaces, so or spaces of ecological importance. So in this diagram, we have areas of productivity. It's a graph depicting productivity, global productivity, as in primary production, plankton, and like marine algae and whatnot. That's one type of ecological niche that you could be interested in the ocean space. Another one would be, for example, areas that might be important habitats for cetaceans or for a specific species of fish or marine mammal, shark, etc. And then lastly, we have maritime jurisdiction, which would include the different zones, maritime zones under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, ranging from our internal waters to the high seas, as well as the continental shelf and the area underneath. So, but outside of maritime jurisdiction, but related to it, we can also look at different maritime zones, marine spatial planning, marine protected areas, marine reserves, fishing priority areas, yacht mooring areas, etc. All of these are different spaces of concern to different actors within the ocean space. And then we have our resources, right? So we talk about living marine resources. So going from plankton all the way up to our predators and including our coral reefs, seagrass beds, other kinds of marine plants and benthic organisms that might not be captured in this particular diagram. We also have our non-living marine resources, so oil and gas. We have polymetallic nodules and other minerals that are found on the seafloor and whatnot. And then we can also speak about our ecosystem services and all the benefits that are to be derived from the ocean or habitats that are related to the ocean, like mangroves and our coastline, seagrass beds, coral reefs, but also cultural and spiritual identity, things that support our cultural and spiritual identity and leisure, food security, etc. So all of these things, the spaces and the resources are used by actors, and these actors fall into different sectors. So we know the obvious sectors like fisheries, shipping and ports, maritime, shipbuilding, oil and gas, etc. But then we also have, as the world goes on and people innovate and find new uses for the ocean, we have emerging industries like marine biotechnology, seabed mining, which is a different topic, renewable energy, offshore wind, etc. So noting that there are all these different spaces, resources, and sectors that are being utilized, and all of these resources and spaces are being utilized by different sector actors who might have different interests, who might want to use the same space and all of that. We need to think of a way to be able to manage all of this activity. So that's one of the reasons that ocean governance came into the forefront, because there was a need for a framework that can account for multiple uses. As you can see in this picture, this is a really busy ocean, right? In reality, you might not actually see this many uses in one place, but you might see some conflicting, activities. Like in St. Lucia, in some areas, we might have fishing happening quite close to areas that divers might frequent, and that's an activity and challenge that needs to be managed. Similarly to having beachgoers and recreation near shipping lanes and important areas for the maritime industry. All of these are uses that need to be accounted for, and as well, with accounting for these uses, we need to balance the interests of the stakeholders to be able to ensure that everybody can equitably access the resources that are available. And in balancing those interests, we need to try to avoid conflict. That one is a bit tougher as well. It takes strong management and strong enforcement to really make sure that people stay within the bounds that they're supposed to stay in. And we don't have as much conflict going on in those spaces. And then because of all this use of the marine resources, we need to look at how we can manage these resources to ensure that they're not depleted, they're not harmed for the future. And that would include protecting and preserving the environment and conserving our marine resources. We also need to account for emerging sectors, new uses of the ocean, because as the world adapts and people innovate, new sectors are going to keep popping up, and we need to be able to have a framework that's flexible enough to accommodate all of these different new activities of the ocean. And then finally, we also need to look at the protection of rights, talking about both global rights that are under the United Nations Convention of the Laws of the Sea, or UNCLOS, as in the freedom of navigation, but also the rights of indigenous and local peoples. So whether it's having a quota for sustainable harvest of a particular species that is important to the culture, or being able to access your beaches, these are rights that need to be considered and protected as time goes on and as the use of the ocean develops. And this need is written into the UNCLOS preamble right there. As soon as you open the book, you go through the table of contents. This is the first bit of text really that you will see. And this is in the third and fourth paragraph to show you how important it was, even at the time of them writing the convention. Boy, how I spell that. Okay. So yes, the third paragraph would say, conscious that the problems of the ocean space are closely interrelated and need to be considered as a whole, and recognizing the desirability of establishing through this convention, with due regard for the sovereignty of all states, a legal order for the seas and oceans, which will facilitate international communication and will promote the peaceful uses of the seas and oceans, the equitable and efficient utilization of their resources, the conservation of their living resources, and the study, protection, and preservation of the marine environment. So even though they don't use the term ocean governance, it was recognized at this point that such a framework would be necessary. So what then is ocean governance? There really isn't one catch-all definition so far for ocean governance, but one definition I found is that it's a broad strokes term that combines governing structures, processes, rules, and norms that shape how relevant actors make decisions, share power, assign responsibility, and pursue accountability in the management of the marine environment. But simply put, you can say that ocean governance systems are essentially a framework of frameworks for integrated, holistic, and equitable management of the ocean space, resources, and activities or sectors. And it's said that ocean governance can be considered as the most recent phase in the evolution of the law of the sea. And ocean governance is closely tied to the development of the blue economy, because as we develop the blue economy and more uses of the ocean arise, there's more need for governance to ensure that we avoid the problems of conflict and overuse of resources and etc. So ocean governance, we can say, has three basic elements. Our first element would be our sectors, because they utilize the ocean spaces, resources, and conduct ocean activities, right? So this is the basis of ocean governance. You need to be able to manage your sectors. And effective ocean governance requires a holistic and integrated approach involving various actors at all levels, including governmental, private, non-governmental, and academic sectors, to achieve sustainable development and well-being. So just from that sentence, again, you can see that ocean governance does involve everybody. Everybody's impacted in some way by ocean governance. Even if you're in a landlocked country, if you receive goods through maritime shipping, then you have some impact on ocean governance, whether it's about carbon footprints or, ports and whatnot. There is some impact. So yes, sector actors are our basis of ocean governance. Then our sectors are now managed by interconnected frameworks. These frameworks all build into each other. And these three frameworks would be our political or diplomatic frameworks, our legal and policy frameworks, and then our institutional and operational frameworks. So our political and diplomatic frameworks would include political agendas and processes and fora. So political promises, involvement in, meetings of heads of state and things like that. And then our diplomacy would be to work towards achieving national objectives through negotiation and international cooperation. So that would look like diplomats from different ministries attending various conferences and meetings to be able to build connections to either get funding or capacity builds, etc. Then we have our legal and policy framework, which would include the laws, policies, plans, regulations, etc., that would manage or ensure the sustainable use and management of ocean spaces, resources, and activities. So I think that one is fairly self-explanatory, but that would be like DBNJ, or I mean oh gosh, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty or Convention, or the Convention on Biological Diversity, etc. And then on the institutional or operational level, that would consider the set of formal organizations that regulate the behavior of specific actors in a country, but also in a particular sector as well. So, for example, one global overarching institutional framework would be the UN bodies, for example, but whereas on a national level, that would be your government or your agencies with some sort of mandate or management responsibility for the ocean. And then our third level of ocean government, or third element of ocean governance, would be our levels. So each framework now works on different levels, starting from multilateral, going all the way to local, being your community, your surroundings, your NGO, etc. So for example, I gave some examples a while ago, but just to go a little bit further, a multilateral political or diplomatic framework or intervention would be like attendance and involvement in the UN Ocean Conference or the Our Oceans Conference or the UN General Assembly, and then a regional legal or policy intervention looks like the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas that established the CARICOM or the CARICOM Common Fisheries Policy. And then national institutional would be, like I said earlier, government agencies with ocean-related mandates. And then these elements come together and work together. And this is actually a diagram that is directly from the presentation I was given, because I don't think I could elaborate it any better than this, really. It's simple, but it's clear. You'd start off with your sectors. You have your different sectors, and they operate or are managed by different frameworks. In the different frameworks would then be managed on different levels. So if we want to, let's say, I'm in fisheries, so me as a fisheries biologist, my sector would be fisheries. The framework that I would primarily work in would be institutional, operational. As I work with the government, I work with the government agency for fisheries. However, I do have some policy and legal interventions, because my work is governed by the Fisheries Act and the associated regulations. But then my work would also have some impact on the political and diplomatic framework, because my work would inform the ministers and diplomats of how what are the needs of the country and what negotiations are needed, etc. What should be the national priorities. So my primary work would be on the national level or regional. In St. Lucia, we have different districts. So if I'm working in a particular district, or local, I'm working with a particular community. If I'm working directly with fisherfolk, then that would be my local intervention. Whereas the political interventions could be on a national level. They could also be on a regional level, as in the district within the country, but also regional, as in the Caribbean region, or multilateral on a global level. Similarly, for like oil or gas, an institutional framework on the global level would be OPEC. So, things like that you can easily see where different actors all fit in and interplay and work together to be able to achieve ocean governance. So you might be able to see yourself in there and not have realized that you were already an integral part of ocean governance. Which brings me to my next slide. Where do you fit in? And really and truly, the answer is everywhere, on every level. Even if you just I'm assuming the majority of the people who are in attendance are members of CYEN. So as an NGO, you would work on a regional or local level, regional as in within Trinidad, but also there's a CYEN network regionally. So you still do work on a Caribbean region level. And maybe you even work on a global level, depending on your connections with the global community for funding, etc. And your environment, um, it's not spelled out here, but the environment does have some impact on the ocean because we look at things from a ridge to reef direction. So you could fall under institutional, operational, under science or biodiversity sectors, on a local, regional, national, on all levels that are pictured in this graphic. So really and truly, you should recognize that you are important in the system and that your actions do actually matter. So yes. And then this would be just highlighting why it is that is important. And I say especially Caribbean youth because um, I don't know about you, but I cannot think of very many Caribbean youth that are really out there on a global scale attending these big meetings and whatnot. We have Khadija and the Ecoseas team, and I'm sure that maybe there's somebody from CYEN who has been able to put themselves out there. But on if you really look at it, we don't you don't hear enough Caribbean voices, and we stand to be impacted the most. All island states really stand to be impacted the most from climate change, and um, so it's really important that our voices are heard and that diverse voices are heard. It's not going to a meeting and hearing the same people from the same countries saying the same thing all the time and speaking for their interests. We need to put ourselves in the rooms in the way that we can, in the rooms, in the petitions, in the proposals and grants, whatever way that we can, to be able to ensure that the diverse voices of the Caribbean are heard. Even within the Caribbean, each island has, different has a diverse voice. Everybody has different interests, and things that they care about deeply. Definitely, Ecoseas is definitely doing their damnedest to change it. Khadija, I applaud you because over the past, I don't even know how many years now, we've been working together. We've been friends, but you've been doing the damn thing. So I really applaud Khadija for pushing that kind of activity, that kind of energy, and encouraging, not only giving us the platform, but encouraging us and building confidence to be able to put ourselves out there. But also, I think Caribbean youth are special for creative solutions and innovation to problems. I think inherently, as Caribbean people, we tend to be very sustainable. How long ago did Massey stop selling plastic bags? And how many of y'all still have a bag of plastic bags in your house? You know, how many of you reuse jam containers and all kind of thing to put in leftovers and all of that? These are forms of sustainability, even if they were not intended as sustainability initially, even if it was cost saving, it's still inherently more sustainable than some other actions. And I think even beyond that, we've proven that we are creative and we are resilient and we can find solutions where it might be difficult, you know. And I think that we should be given more chances to be able to display that and that display that resiliency and tenacity and creativity. Um, in terms of tailored advocacy, I would like to say it really irks me when I sit down in a room with people from the global north and somebody's giving a presentation about things that have nothing to do with me. Like we are all connected, but there are certain problems that are first world problems that, you know, they are not really relevant to us. And I don't think that kind of messaging is effective. Whereas getting Caribbean people to tell Caribbean stories and, you know, speak to the Caribbean youth, go to schools and whatnot, I think that's important. And it, I think it hits differently when you see somebody from your own backyard doing something. I very vividly remember the chief fisheries officer at the time coming to my school when I was in primary school and talking about marine biology. And here I am, however many years later, you know. Um, we and related to that is also youth empowerment, because seeing other people like us telling our stories and getting somewhere also empowers people to do other things, but also being able to build our own organizations and apply for our own grants and whatnot can help build capacity of our community to be able to engage more effectively in ocean governance and in different aspects of ocean conservation. That is also related to now bridging science policy gaps. Um, I think that we have a lot of bright minds who can really serve as the go between, not just doing science and policy, because we do have a lot of great minds doing either of those and both in some cases, but also there's an opportunity for people to now come in and fill the gap in between and be able to communicate the science to policymakers, to stakeholders, in a way that's palatable and easy to understand, using social media and infographics and etc. You know, that's an opportunity that youth can explore, as well as delving into citizen science, in terms of engaging. Let's say you go assist with a coral restoration activity, or you know, collecting data on seabirds, on, you know, different things. It's, you know, there are ways that even the smallest person can assist and help out. Um, Also considering the fact that in the region we're data deficient, and we often depend on international agencies to come and do studies for us, whereas, you know, if we empower ourselves to be able to collect data ourselves, to be able to do research ourselves, then we can, you know, we can do more for ourselves. We can consider our interests a bit more. Um, and then that considers long-term sustainability for the youth in particular, because most of us still have very many years on this earth to think about the sustainability of the future. We have to deal with the problems of yesteryear as well as the problems of today, and think about the problems of the future. But because of the advantage of our youth, we have more time to sit down and try to, you know, take action. We have youth and energy on our side, not downplaying the action of, you know, the older generation, but I'm just saying we're here for a bit longer, so we can there's more scope for us to see through things on a long-term level and ensure that things continue in a positive trajectory, and not that institutional knowledge is lost in the shuffle between generations. And then finally, we need to protect the future, and not just our future. Because really and truly, yes, we're here and we're doing our best to conserve and protect the environment for ourselves, but also we need to think of the future generations and ensuring that they are able to benefit from the resources that the ocean has to offer us, and that future action is sustainable and managed well. I I heard this quote once at a presentation, and it really stayed with me. So I just want to share it as I'm closing. But the quote is, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors; we borrow it from our children." Um, and I think that really outlines why we need to really be involved um, in ocean governance and conserving ocean resources, because it's not just about us and being able to see tomorrow. Yes, that is very important, but we also would like to have our kids and our kids' kids and etc. be able to live comfortably and be able to benefit from the ocean and not have to worry about being climate refugees, etc. So yes, that's it. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free.
Yes, thank you so much for the amazing presentation. Really resounded with me when you said that no matter where you are in the world, even if you live on a landlocked part of the world, you are involved in ocean governance.
Mm-hmm.
So, does anyone have questions? Okay, post them in the chat.
No problem. I am glad you learned a lot.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions or comments, we'll hand back over to Michaela now.
Okay, hi everyone. Sorry. Hi everybody. Um, yes, so thank you, Monique, for that amazing presentation. And I'm sure like you all may not have questions right now, but you know, it's like when we get into these discussions, you might come up with some questions. So, if you have questions that may not have been answered, then maybe we can answer it here. These may be important questions for us to think about as like a society. So, I just want to acknowledge that Joseph, one of our wonderful CYN members, has put in the chat a survey that we're also doing as part of the local conference of youth that we would love for you all to fill out, because this is another way that you can sort of like include your perspectives on these macro level discussions, right? And like, for people who weren't able to attend today, they can always fill out the survey at that link. And if you lose the survey link, we're like always posting it, so you can follow us at CYNCT or Ecoseas Caribbean on Instagram. So yeah, thank you so much, Monique. And I just want to break out now into the workshop portion of this workshop, which is what you all came for, I know. So we have a little um Oh, I see. Sorry, there's a question here from Joseph. So maybe we can go into that question, Monique. If the Global High Seas Treaty is technically a form of ocean governance, and if you want to like mention anything about that.
Yes, so yeah, technically it would be considered a form of ocean governance because ocean governance would encompass anything basically that would manage the ocean. So right now, I believe you're talking about the BBNJ, right? That would be one of the hottest topics in ocean governance right now. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, there are other ways that we do it here locally. Like for instance, we have laws on like marine protected areas and stuff like that. I think the EMA sort of like manages those laws. And then, there is also the Institute of Marine Affairs, which is more involved in like research and that sort of thing. But all of these things contribute to ocean governance. You can contribute to it in many different ways. So yeah, I just going to share my screen now, and we will have one of our facilitators supporting in doing a little workshop. So I don't know if any of you all have ever used Menti before, but I'm just gonna share my screen, and basically we can like basically, you can put answers to some of the questions that we ask here based on your perspectives. And what we will be doing with these answers is just like collating them into a little report. And we want to use this in like further advocacy, where young people can fill the gaps in ocean governance and other related marine issues. So yes, I'm just gonna share my screen. Just give me 1 second because um it's a little technical thing always figure this out. So okay, so I'm just gonna pass it to Ariana. Just quickly, all of you never used Mint before. You just have to go on your phone and scan this QR code on the screen, and then you can answer the question. So when you scan the QR code, I'll change the screen. Yes, I'm just gonna pass it to Ariana.
Hi everyone. Um, so this Menti pool, it will be a lot of fun exercise for everybody. So after is everyone on the Menti pool? Did everyone get through? Could you just type in the chat so I could like go on to the questions. Okay, I see.
Thumbs up.
There's just one okay, I'm seeing.
I see 3 thumbs up.
Okay, so we could go on to the question 1. What do you think is being done well in regards to ocean governance locally or regionally? So I would like you all to put in responses. What is your opinions? I know Monique talked about the coral reefs and the fishes, things like blue economy. What is your thoughts on it? She talked about all the industries and the resources being utilized. And we need ocean governance. So what do you think ideas that you have Things like marine protected areas on the coastal and marine and like enforcement or community involvement.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know if you'll know about like the CSOs, the civil society organizations. They, do a lot of work around like ocean governance and protecting our marine protected areas. That could be one way, like the Environmental Research Institute, Charlottesville. There's a lot of like monitoring on the coral reefs in Northeast Tobago. Um, and Seth could speak more to that because Seth actually has done a lot of work on that. And yeah, there's more. Pass back to you, Ariana.
I'm seeing great responses already. Someone said coastal cleanups by different organizations. That's a great one. Having UNESCO protective sites such as the mangrove board wall. Okay. Let's look at about it, right? You could have things like blue economy and into I can't remember the word I was gonna say just now. Yes, that's the initiative. Monitoring coastal and coral ecosystems and the factors that may affect them. Okay. Yeah, well, I think everyone basically give their ideas on this question. We can now move on to the other question.
Sorry. We were having a little participation in person here. So, one of our
Oh, okay.
mentioned that like there are a lot of things being done, but things that being done well, it's a little harder to like think about because a lot of our institutions don't have the necessary resources that they need. So yeah, that's one of the reflections. But there are lots of government institutions, like we mentioned, like the Institute of Marine Affairs and other government agencies that deal with, marine protected areas and um that are, they are doing what they can, but it's not necessarily that they have enough resources to do it well, right? So that was one of our points here in person that I think is very important for us to, this is a little bit of like a SWOT analysis here. Strengths. This is, we're talking about what is strong about our ocean governance here, and the fact that, a lot of us, we have like a good few of us on this call, but we all can't really name what is being done well. So, that's something that we um maybe we need more awareness about among young people, but also, as we were saying here, like maybe there's not enough that being done well regionally and locally. So yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to sort of react to that. But we can totally move on to the next question if nobody has any other reflection.
Yeah, I agree with no said because I remember last year the Marine Institute they were doing putting plans in place to start like a um lionfish reliance fund basically to connect the hunters to the person that are interested in eating it, but not much people know about it. So things are being done, but maintaining is a different story.
Okay, I'm gonna move to the next slide.
Okay, so what opportunities do you think exist for youth in the space? What role can we play? So Monique was basically saying everywhere, every level, we can have we have opportunities. We can work on regional levels, global levels. Example for us on this as CYEN members. So what do you think? Remember, all our actions do matter and are important in the system. We can spread awareness. We can campaign.
Yes, I want to jump in here actually. As you said, campaign, Ariana, like, that's something that we want to do with this, not necessarily like, making big campaigns and stuff on social media or in person, like we're not protesting, but something that we want to do with you all's feedback is to understand how we could advocate for, more youth opportunities in this space. Like, do you all really feel like there are opportunities in this space? And if there are not, what role can we play where we can open up those opportunities? And that's what CYN and Ecoseas, we're here for that. But we think that there are gaps that we can fill. And with your feedback, we could be more aware of some of these gaps that we can help to fill in this space.
Hi there. So I think I would like to jump in here. One thing that's important to me is to realize that we as we as youth have a lot of power in the way we do things. So come on, I hear that we don't have a space to talk or we don't have a voice. I also hear that youth want to be part of the conversation. Yes, but one thing to realize, and I feel like a lot of people are missing, older and younger, is that there are opportunities for us. There are plenty of open dialogues, open discussions being had. spaces that you can come in. And more often than not, sometimes I will hear, uh, sadly so, that, oh, that is not for us, or what's not qualified to talk about this, or some other thing, when in reality, there is no need to have that. Yes, qualifications in some cases are important, but the fact of the matter is, this is not, dialogues are not job interviews. Dialogues are not an application. The part thing is, you only need the only qualification that we need is to be affected. And whether you like it or not, we are always affected by these decision making. And like I said here, taking part in decision making discussions and open consultations, very, very important. We are all affected by the economy, good and bad. So it's always important for each and every one of us to understand that. And when these opportunities come to take part, to grab a hold of it.
I saw somebody put something on the committee, and I'm curious, like, what is Gen Z community under Echo International? If you wanna like jump in, on unmute or put it in the chat, like we want to know about these opportunities. Yeah.
Yes, I could jump in with Gen Z. So that's our online community where ocean enthusiasts, ocean activists, if you care about the ocean in general, you could join that online communities. For youths globally, you could join. So you'll be able to swap ideas, hear what is being done in different parts of the world. Yeah. I could send it in the chat as well if anybody interested in joining us. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we're networks, CYN and Ecoseas, we're networks, but we also like, we're not the only networks that exist out there, and we're not, the only ones that you can get knowledge through. So, it's important to be part of all these different groups. And yeah, I see like a lot of you all have put here about, education and awareness and recruitment. These are important ways, and there, there may not be a lot of knowledge among young people about like where they could get jobs in this field, because there are some private sector companies that you can actually work with that do things around ocean governance. So, maybe there needs to be more around that. I don't know what you all think. Um, but some of us also said like taking part in decision making and consultations. Are there any other ways that you think, you know, youth can be a part of these decision making processes? I know somebody said advocacy, um, virtually and in person. So yeah, are there any other ways that you think that we can advocate or be part of the like basically bring ourselves, open the door for ourselves into these decision making spaces? Um, yeah, and this can also be at the regional level, it doesn't have to be something that's local. There are lots of those like conferences and stuff. So um, yeah.
I believe that too. I was not aware of a lot of these opportunities before.
Hi, if I could just jump in real quick too. It's definitely true that some of these opportunities are not shared to their fullest, and even some of them require a payment for you to, take part. I've seen a number of like ecology internships that require you to pay some fee to be able to participate. But I think one important thing is networking, and not just within your organization, but within other organizations as well, because um, for a fact, there are certain things that I might not have known about if it wasn't for Khadijah and being part of, at the time, what was SOA Caribbean, now Ecoseas, you know? So I think just finding like-minded people and trying to work with them can definitely bring about opportunities for you.
Yeah, 100% agree, Monique. And that's why we wanted to do something in person as well. Like just for people to connect with each other is really important for you to network if you want to have um you know some of these, like you want to have access to some of these opportunities in reality. Like you don't always get them by just applying. Sometimes you need to know people, right? So I need to know people in space, and that's why, again, like we exist as networks, Ecoseas Caribbean, and a lot of these other environmental networks. You can also get exposure, like to education and opportunities to be a part of decision making uh, spaces. I see there's a question in the chat. Um, how do you feel about an ocean and climate weekend, career fair, and networking event? But not just careers, but also research opportunities, projects, etc. I think that question is for Monique. But in general, I think it's a wonderful idea.
Hi, no, the question was for me. Just unmuted myself real quick, but as given the discussion and everything that was going on, that just popped into my mind. And I have a deadline for a grant proposal on Monday. So I was just like, if this is something that everybody is interested in doing, then I wouldn't mind submitting that and trying to make it happen. So I was just asking for feedback on yes or no.
Okay, that's really cool. I look an overwhelming response that people think that would be great. I think so too. Um, yeah, I, we last year we did a little stakeholder landscape mapping about the environmental landscape. And basically, it wasn't about the physical features of the environment, but it was about the stakeholders that exist and do environmental work to teach people, to teach young people about like who's out there and where you can like contribute to different work. It's not just the EMA, it's not just, the Ministry of Planning. There are other stakeholders that do stuff. It's not just UIN, it's not just volunteer organizations. There are many more. So I think that would be a really like a much needed thing to reach, especially people who are not so aware, but also people who are like now graduating. Like it would be really great to like, collaborate with some like university on that. I think so. And also like, in some way to reach people on the front lines who need to be in these discussions and in these spaces. So yeah, I think we agree that that would be a great thing to include in your grant proposal. I think it's a wonderful output of the local conference of youth. Um, yay! Thank you all for your responses. Okay, I'm gonna pass it back to Ariana because I think that we're all good right now. And we can go on to the next slide. That's okay.
Okay, so what opportunities do you think are for regional collaboration in this space? So what do you all think? Have organizations such as, if I could remember, is Caribbean Regional Fisheries. I think it's CRFM, and I think they coordinate sustainable fishing practices.
Think there's one response here on like countries working together at the policy level. Um, there are issues like invasive species, and Monique mentioned that the Caribbean set, I don't know how to pronounce that word, sorry, cetacean society does work on different I guess cetaceans. Um, countries looking to create policies concerning plastic pollution. Yeah. Yes, we can do that at a regional level because, there are some countries that in the Caribbean that have already banned like styrofoam and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, in Trinidad and Tobago, that might be like a crazy thing, but there are countries in the Caribbean that have done it. So why not advocate for these kind of things as countries that do not have these provisions in place?
I think you could also, okay, so I think you could also collaborate your different universities and research to help in this matter.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes, for sure. We should totally put this in our report.
Collaborative discussions are always something I should have. Collaborative research especially will bring more validity because you think about research. The thing about research is that it only gets more powerful with more data you have. So
Mm-hmm.
it's being on a more Caribbean aspect instead of it being only one country, it can make it extremely powerful. The Caribbean, the entire the Caribbean getting together would definitely make a powerful institution for research institution. That if and because we see it all the time with the US, with Canada, with Europe, you will find that multiple European countries working together on, on specific research projects. Let's say, for instance, the Human Genome Project. A lot of that was with America and Europe. Many different countries were together, but we found that very little Caribbean countries were together with that. When we very much can. We are in close proximity. We have the resources. We have the people. We cannot say we don't have the brain power because we very much do. So the only thing that exists is a way to pull us all together to do it.
All right, I just I know we're switching, but um I see somebody said like regional funding for youth-led blue economy initiatives like ocean startups, tech projects, or sustainable fisheries. And I saw that there's a movement to like push Caribbean philanthropy around climate change and stuff. So, maybe there's an area we can advocate for like more youth funding for youth-led solutions around these critical things. And, that's where the research comes in too, like having a number to back up, what what support we need. Like we've done the research, we're coming to funders and philanthropic funders with these things. Um, would be like really important ways of like how we could collaborate on a regional level and how we could have more funding into the space, because more funding means like more job opportunities for people and more work that's actually getting done. So yeah. Um, so yeah, there is a lot more we can do than just like decision makers coming together at CARICOM and stuff and doing stuff like we can't always wait for that. We can advocate for them to do these things, but we can also work on different initiatives ourselves that can push them and like fill other gaps in the field. So I'm glad to see that you all also put like really diverse answers.
If anyone has any more ideas, you can feel free to put it in the chat.
If you also have more ideas after this seminar, you can add it to our survey and we'll make sure and keep track of that.
It seems like I could have no more questions.
Okay, so move on to the next question. What do you think are some gaps or threats in the field? So what I think is that some of our laws are not enforced properly. I think that's some gaps. Mm-hmm. Improper waste management. I also think the mindset of people.
Hi everyone. Um, I'm just one of the participants here in person, and what I think are some of the gaps or threats in the field is, of course, the lack of capacity, both from a financial but also a human resource standpoint. I think if we are to even begin thinking about implementing some of the international treaties into like our domestic jurisdiction, we have to have like the human resources available in each agency to carry out these specific roles and functions. And of course, like those institutions also have to be created or even empowered to handle the mandate that they are to carry. I think in Trinidad and Tobago, there is a lot of legislation on to some extent, but it's just that because ocean governance is very broad, we don't have like one specific legislation that deals with ocean governance in a sense. Like there's no Ocean Governance Act. So you will have like laws that are scattered or almost fragmented, but they touch on the concept of ocean governance. So part of that involves like being able to like really identify who's responsible for what in the subsectors of ocean governance. In the presentation earlier, we looked at like fisheries, oil and gas, and just some of the other like actors and sectors that are in this room. And of course, within each sector, there's always that challenge of being able to fulfill the rules that they are supposed to deal with. Sometimes they may not even know what their responsibility would be. So there's that. There was also a discussion briefly about data collection and research. And of course, I mean, in order for youth to even have some sort of involvement in this, or even bring awareness, there needs to be data in the first place. And some of the challenges that we have been seeing is in the Caribbean, at least, that challenge of like accessing data. It's not to say that data isn't there, but it's just not collected properly. We don't really have the reporting systems and the data collection systems that are in place. In addition to which, data might be again scattered across different agencies, so it depends on what they have available. So just kind of being able to like identify those things and seeing how it can be strengthened or improved, I think is important. And then of course, like, the research can take place once there's data that's available. So I think that's in summary what I would consider to be the gaps affecting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, so I sent something in the chat, but I'm not too sure about how updated our technology is and to do proper research and stuff.
I don't know about technology that we need, to be honest. But yeah, the fragmentation is real. It's siloing of work at that, not just the government level, like even in civil society, sometimes we stick to ourselves, we don't know what each other is doing, and sometimes end up duplicating other work or um missing pieces that we don't know is missing because we're not collaborating with each other. So yeah, I saw somebody click here, mentioning oil and gas. Sorry, let me just move this QR code. Yeah. And that's a really important aspect that we haven't spoken about as yet, but oil and gas is something that, it interacts with the ocean and it interacts with ocean governance, like different boundaries of where, the ocean boundaries, like we were talking about the I think BBNJ agreement, and those things like overlap with like which boundaries the oil and gas field going to be in and that sort of thing. And um that's an area that can also have advocacy, especially in Trinidad and Tobago being a oil and gas economy, still majority. And part of the reason why we wanted to do this blue economy thing, why we call it blue economy and not just like, I don't know, ocean or something more like ocean vibes, is because there's a need for us to diversify our economy, and the blue economy has a lot of untapped potential, as you mentioned here, as you all mentioned here in this mention, like for blue jobs. So yeah, that's a definitely a huge gap, I think, that um is facing us right now. And then threats, speak about like what are the like external factors that might actually be affecting our ability to fill some of the gaps. So I don't know if you all have any sort of threats. We have gaps and we have weaknesses, but I don't know if y'all have any like threats. We know climate change and rising sea levels is something that threatens our coastal infrastructure and these kind of things. But there could be other things that we also see as threats to like development in this area. Yeah. Thank you all for your answers.
Just want to say one last point on this, that when we're talking about technology, it doesn't just have to be the latest phone or piece of hardware or even software. Sometimes it even comes down to just practices. A lot of times you would find that even with the greatest technologies and all that, some these needs aren't being met because the practices that come with those technologies aren't there. So I think it's very important not to just focus on not having these specific technologies themselves, not having the specific thing to do what you want, but also having that practices in play that will then utilize it to the best of your ability.
Hi, just to jump in real quick. Also on the research, definitely technology, having the newest technology does not always mean that you have the best science. I agree with the previous point. But also, while I did say, we don't necessarily want to always depend on people to like international organizations and research departments to come and do the work for us. I think it's also important that recognizing we have capacity issues. One, looking for this funding to better equip our research complement, whether that's equipment, whether that's human capacity, etc. But also partnerships, research partnerships, wherein we actually have a say in what research is collected and what's done with it, and it's not just feeding into somebody else's database, but it's actually something that we want and is useful to us and not just to somebody else's dissertation.
So thank you all so much for your answers. Truly, these topics have been extremely thought-provoking, at least in my end, because I don't work in that field, so it's new to me to think about all these aspects in such a deep way. It's something that never really occurred to me to do. But now I'm realizing just how important it really is for us to truly take part and understand what it really means to have that an interaction with the real economy, understanding that diversifying our ability to do what we do in Trinidad and Tobago, in the region of the Caribbean itself, is something that we truly need to work on, not regionally, but not just regionally, globally, because the oceans themselves are a vital source and largely an untapped source. So something that makes up more than 70% of the earth, it contributes very little to our very economies. That's something that I find very, very interesting, to say the least. So Ariana, I'll pass back on. No, I'll pass back, sorry, to Michaela. I'll pass it back to Michaela.
Okay, thank you all for joining me. And a little early today because yeah, we don't need to talk about everything. But I just want to remind you all that we have a survey that you can fill out where you can like have more extensive answers. And yeah, Joseph has put it in the chat so voraciously. So thank you very much. And I just want to remind you that we have spaces to come and get like leadership experience and a lot of times these issues seem so high level that you don't know where you can contribute as one young person. And that's why it's important to just like learn about things and network. You can come into people network like Monique came in through Ecoseas. And you can get exposure and expertise on a lot of areas by just like being in people's networks and getting exposure to opportunities. So that's why we exist. And also, it has to advocate for everything that you've mentioned today. So thank you all for your perspectives. And this is the last workshop of our three-part series. So we will not be having any more, but we will have the survey circulating for like a couple more days. So please share it if you can and fill it out. And yeah, we will keep you all updated on the outcome of this whole local conference of youth, and I'm sure Khadija will keep us updated on that conference that on like blue economy opportunities and jobs. So I want to thank you all very much for coming out today, and for those of you all who came out to every single session, like y'all are amazing, and we appreciate you all so much. So thank you, everybody, and you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. And yeah, if you want to be in contact with us, Monique put her social media in her presentation. And you can again CYNTT_ on Instagram. And we have Ecoseas Caribbean as well on Instagram. So please come and check us out if you wanna learn more about how you can contribute. So thank you all very much. And Joseph has put some more opportunities in the chat. So thank you very much for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.